Hey everyone, welcome to the show, Script and Style, where we talk about web development with the people that make it happen. I'm Todd Gardner from TrackJS JavaScript Error Monitoring, and my co-host David Walsh, creator of the popular blog, davidwalsh.name. How's your summer going, David?
It's going great, man, but I'm so happy to be back. I've been waiting for that intro for months. We had that short sort of impromptu summer break with the podcast.
Not so short.
When it's hot outside and you're in the pool and stuff, everything feels too short, right? But while we were taking that vacation, I thought that it would be really good to come back and talk a little bit about work-life balance and the role that plays in our lives. But before we do that, how was your vacation? What did you do while we were away?
It wasn't so much of a vacation. Did spend a little bit of time outside in the summer in Minnesota, which is gorgeous. Went to Kansas City, did a conference down there and threw a pub comp, and basically just spending as much time like at home chilling as I can. How about you?
Experiencing life? Good.
Yeah.
I went off to Mountain View, which is in Canada. Rough trip, right? And saw some beautiful mountains at the Mozilla All Hands. After that, unfortunately, I had a loss in the family, so I was out for a while. And then I was on to a vacation of my own, a staycation, if you will, for which you never come back as refreshed as you think you would when you have two young kids. But it was busy, much like probably you in Minnesota. It was very hot, so we tried to figure out ways to stay cool. But it's been really good. I feel recharged and I'm super excited to go. And again, we're going to talk work-life balance. So why don't we introduce our two guests?
Perfect. So we have two guests joining us for our conversation today. First is Eric Brandis, the CTO and co-founder of TrackJS JavaScript Error Monitoring and my partner in crime. He's on Twitter at BrandisEric. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you guys for having me.
And my friend Lemon, the builder of Internet Things, the president for life of the TheFPlus podcast, and all-around web developer at Ahoy Lemon. Thanks for coming on.
How are we doing? Yeah.
I thought I was excited, but Lemon's more excited than all of us. I'm really excited to have these two guests here. One, I'm excited to have Lemon here because I always am. But in addition, I know that Lemon does a whole bunch of stuff outside of work with his podcasts and his websites and projects and stuff. So it'll be great to hear about his work-life balance. And then with Eric, I'm excited to hear how two people trying to manage the same business are able to do work-life and the differences and similarities that might go with that. So I'm really excited about our guest panel. But let's kick it off. We're going to start with where work-life balance is the worst. And that's when you first, maybe graduate from college, graduate from school, and you're looking for a job, or you're just jumping into a new industry. Now, for me, I had no idea what work-life balance was when I first got out of school, right? Because I was working 40 to 60 hours a week. While I was going to school full-time to pay for it. So the whole idea of work-life balance didn't really mean anything to me back then. And then, of course, like you jump into that sort of first job. And I don't know if you guys were like me, but I didn't expect a work-life balance because I expected I was going to work myself into the ground to prove that I belonged in this industry. So Lemon, how did you get into web? And then did you have a good sense of work-life balance?
No.
Before you got in, and then when you started?
No, never. No. Because I came at it like completely unprofessionally. Like I was, just a guy just working at retail jobs, doing whatever, and so the like creative work, the work in front of computers, like that kind of thing, was all unpaid. It was just stuff you did, to hang out with people and for your ego and stuff like that. So you had a job, like an actual job that you didn't pay that much attention to, so that you could pour more money or pour more like attention into like the creative thing, which like eventually for me, like in weird twisty ways, like ended up being like a thing that made money, but like that took a decade. And so until that time, it was just a lot of like, well, there was work, which was just a place that you had to be. And then there was like the thing that I like doing, which was, if anything, like a net loss of money.
Did that become a, how do I say it? Did that personal time, did that website stuff become work in your personal time, would you say? Or is it something that you continue to enjoy?
I think I do both, because right, I mean, you know, because I do at this point I do websites for fun, I do websites for work, and so sometimes the stuff I'm doing for fun like feels bad because I'm working in stuff that's not particularly enjoyable. It's like it's a thing that I'm trying to get done, and that's not the best. And then other times I'm doing something for the job, and I'm trying out something new. I'm doing like a little weird like SVG animation, or like doing some like little piece of tech that I've never done before. And so that feels good. So like there's a little bit of bleed. But yeah, I mean, in general, like the sites that I'm making for money, like really are rarely even nearly as fun to work on, and rarely something that I'm nearly as proud of.
Okay. I feel the same way too sometimes. And then to set a baseline, Eric, same question to you. Like, how did you come into the industry, and what were your expectations or experience of what work-life balance even meant?
So maybe to start even before that, so I came into the industry the usual path, right? I went to a 4-year university, got a comp sci degree, did the internship, got like a full-time computer programming job, right? So it's pretty standard. But to back up a few years, when I turned 14, my parents were like, "You need to have a job. Like, it's time to work."
Freeloading too much.
Like, yeah. So like I actually started working when I was 13, actually 12 cutting the lawn, and then 13 cutting more lawns, and then being a caddy at Minnesota Valley Country Club. And then by 14 and 15, you could work legally. So I started working at Cub Foods as a cashier 20 hours a week. And so like my parents were like, "You will work," right? And so for my whole life, it has been expected that you work. And my mom had a rule in high school that I couldn't quit one job until I had another job. And so I had 9 jobs in high school, and they were all terrible. Well, not all, but the vast majority were terrible. With the worst one being I was the mouse at Chuck E. Cheese.
Oh! I might have hit you at a birthday party sometime.
You were not the only one, my friend. You were not the only one. So like that like sort of was the pinnacle of like worst job ever. And we don't need to get into it too much, but suffice it to say, no one has ever, in my experience, told me about a job that was worse than that one. And so ever since then, I sort of have this like fear in the lizard part of my brain that like I don't ever want to go back to that. Right. And so when I got my first internship, I'm like, this is the best job in the world. They're paying me a fortune. I'm sitting in a climate controlled office building. I can take a long lunch. It's the greatest. And so, for me, David, I agree with you. I wanted to prove myself, the first full-time job that I had. So I'm like working, 45 hours a week, right? Which like is really nothing actually when you sit in an office and can surf the internet and have sweet cafeteria food that's subsidized. Like it's no big deal. So I guess to answer your question, like I'm a worker. I've always been a worker. And so like my interpretation of work-life balance is probably a little bit different than some other people's. So
awesome. So we'll talk about, how you got from that ultra worker to still being a worker, but recognizing work-life balance over the years. Todd, how about yourself?
Today, I would consider myself a struggling workaholic, and I'm trying to not be that. But when I first got out of school, I definitely was not. So I got a comp sci degree, and then I went and worked in an IT department, not as a programmer, just like as a system admin. And a big part of why I did that was because it allowed me to be as lazy as I possibly could. Like,
yeah, good job for being lazy.
Yeah, like it's all of the benefits that Eric was throwing out there of like just kind of sitting in an air-conditioned office. and I didn't really have anything I needed to do. It was like I was there in case like I needed to like add a Windows permission or reboot a machine or something like that. Stuff that was like trivially easy and I could script away so that I didn't actually have that much real work to do. And yeah, so I had a fantastic work-life balance at the beginning because I did almost no work. So somewhere along the line, though, I became more interested in the programming and the automating away of my job, and it just kind of developed somewhere along the line where I started spending more and more time doing it. But it definitely didn't start that way at the beginning. I did not. I had a great work-life balance at the beginning. The workaholic was beaten into me over years.
Well done, Eric. Well done.
Oh, this was long before I even met Eric.
I think Todd's definition of workaholic and mine are also a little different.
Oh, this is exactly what I wanted to hear, Eric. This is perfect. So I guess for me, when I look at the way that work-life balance was introduced to myself and has changed over the years, has been through life events. I already talked about, getting out of school, getting that first job, and not expecting any work-life balance because I needed to prove myself. I needed to put in the hours. I needed to make sure that, people recognize that I belonged in this industry. But as I look back over the past 15 years, I've been a professional web developer now. It has been those life experiences and those life changes that have sort of shaped what work-life balance means to me. Just naming a couple of them, getting those first challenging projects where you were, meant to work because the project got underbid and it needs to be done on time. And, the person who put out the bid was either just looking for money or didn't get it right or, for whatever reason. So that's something that can still happen to modern day. Mm-hmm. But then, you get to the point where you're working toward promotion. And that's another thing that draws you back into work all the time. When I went remote, the computer's always there. And so you end up, some people worry about, I'm going to be distracted. I'm not going to get any work done. For me, I ended up working longer because work was always there. The computer was always there. Someone could always ping me at 8 o'clock because we have someone, working in Australia or on the West Coast or whatever.
Is there an expectation? Because I haven't done much remote work at all in my life. Like, is there a temptation that people have to like overcorrect if you're in a situation where like not a lot of people are remote? For the ones that are, is there a situation where it's like, well, since I'm this, like I need to do a 12-hour workday because otherwise it's unfair or something like that? Like, does that happen?
I don't think so. I think if you set a good expectation and your teammates know when you are and when you won't be available, I think that's the best route. I've never had a problem with that. I'll say that.
I will tell you the inverse is very common, where people are like, I just need to make sure my Slack presence indicator is green, right? And so I've got the mouse wiggler so that it like never, you know what I mean? It's like I would say in my experience, people exploit remote opportunities. Like they use it as an excuse to do less work on average, I would say. Yeah. Has been my experience.
Yeah. I've seen that happen too. And I've wondered, because it really, there's no other thing that happens there other than personal honesty, right? Like there's nothing else that you can use as a metric, right?
There is. I worked at one remote job where you needed to record hours for how long a given task took. Mm-hmm. And that makes work even harder because even if let's say the task takes you, say, 2 hours, if your employer is wanting 8 hours logged every day, you're going to be in trouble. Yeah. Because there's time in between to figure out what you want to be doing. And there's no real way to record that.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen Schindler's List? Like where the guy, like the Nazi guy goes up to the worker in the factory and is like, make a screw like as fast as you can, right? And the guy like makes the screw super fast, right? Because he's under the gun and he wants to like impress this guy. And the Nazi overlord is like, how come there aren't more screws then, right? Like if you can make it this fast, how come there's just not overflowing amounts of screws, right? So like that, the hour tracking reminds me of that, right?
Well,
Where
and
it's like,
that's so emblematic to just agency life across the board. Like there's very, very few agencies that don't have that as a fundamental concept of like hours for dollars. And so then you have the situation where it's like every person is expected to put 8. And so you've got these like weird extra buckets, right? There'll be like an admin bucket or like an emails bucket or whatever. And that's like the one thing that's not tracked. So therefore that's what all of the hours goes into, you know, because I've only got 6 here. So I'm going to put 16 in this other thing that's not actually tracked.
yep. Yeah, that tracking hours is the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, first of all, it obviously impacts work-life balance. It makes it much worse, right? And also, it brings on a ton of anxiety, which is something that maybe we should talk about in another episode, because you're expected to perform and you're expected to hit an unrealistic metric unless you work extra hours, which digs into your life, especially if you have a family and such. Jumping back to more family events. Getting married was a big one for me. You needed to be there for your partner at the end of the day and not working all the time. Obviously, health issues are another one too. One thing that I think would be really interesting is if we each sort of shared personal experiences of when work-life balance was the worst, how we got to the point where we understood it, and where we are today. I think that would be really interesting. Todd, how about yourself?
Sure. I have a pretty recent thing that I'm actually still struggling with. So I think we talked about in our last episode before the break that I'd recently come down with Bell's palsy, where like half my face went numb, and like it's coming back, but I still have like some difficulty with it. But it was totally a stress-induced thing. And it was a stress-induced thing because I was carrying a lot of anxiety about the business, and I was carrying a lot of anxiety about like travel and like going to conferences, which like part of me felt like was part of the business, but part of me was just like I had my ego tied up in it. And if I counted like everything that I was doing, I was working way too much. But I was working on like the wrong things. And so like I was stressed because I would spend all this time preparing for an event. And in doing that, I would be neglecting my family responsibilities, and I would be neglecting the things I probably should have been working on for the core business. And so my family life was getting a little wonky, and the business wasn't doing as well as I wanted to. And I still felt like I was working all of the time. And that was just this major stressor for me that ended up kind of resulting in this medical issue. And in response to that, I think I've been reevaluating that. I've been backing away from conferences and trying to refocus my efforts on the business, but putting like boundaries around it and saying, you know what, we're not at a point where I have to be like super stressed about it all the time. And I should take time and spend it with family and be present. And that is, still honestly a challenge for me. And I'm still trying to figure out where those boundaries are. But I think that's all tied up with this work-life balance. And so I have by no means mastered this. I am struggling daily with it.
But it sounds good that you've recognized what the problem was. You're like trying to be too much to too many people. I
was totally saying yes to too many things. Like, yeah. There was this business that was like, it was our livelihood, and it was this thing that we've spent a ton of time and effort, and it still needs care and feeding. But I was saying yes to all of these events, and I was saying yes to like throwing PubConf events, and I was saying yes to going to these meetups, and like I just couldn't do all of them. I shouldn't have done all of them. That's still kind of a hard thing to learn.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that. Lemon, how about yourself? When did you understand that you needed a better work-life balance, and where do you feel you are today with it?
Oh, I think I'm currently probably in the worst version of that that I've probably ever had, because like I have a hard time because I build the things, right, and then the things are just supposed to like set sail and and whatever. but that's never been the case. I never able to, tracking this back like 25 years ago, you used to be able to make zines, right? Zines were really cool because they took a whole lot of time. And then when you were done, you just handed them out and they were done. You can't change it. There's nothing, the zine, maybe you'll do another one, but probably not, honestly. And that's not the case for websites. So all of these dumb little projects that I have, needs something. And because some of my personal, ego or sense of self is tied into them, that it becomes something that I need to kind of maintain. And I have a hard time. I have a hard time with collaborators in general, that if I'm working with collaborators, then what I need to have is some sort of idea of you are where am I? Where's the ceiling? Where's my box? Right? Do I run everything? Because if I run everything, I'm going to, and I'm just gonna I'm gonna run scattershot all over people's feelings and sense of self and sense of worth. No. We're gonna do it my way because I'm that. And if I've got a ceiling, then I have to figure out where that is. And so I'm in lots of those situations. I have 4 things I'm working on right now where people are sending me emails and asking me about stuff, and I've been responding with well, I actually don't have the mental bandwidth to deal with that right now. And they're like, yeah, but when though? Okay, cool, great, here we go. So that's where I am, and I don't know. It's not getting better.
I think one of the interesting points that you made, which is something that I've thought about often, and I try to explain to people, and they don't really understand, is that websites are special in that they're never done.
Yeah.
They can always be faster. They can always have less errors. They can always be, optimized here. They can always add more features. And that's when I've explained to some of my friends and family that for the sake of people's wellness, I wish either employers or, I don't want to say the government, but one day a month, I would like to mow lawns. And that's not to demean people that do landscape, that work. It's just, I want to do something that's done at some point.
Yeah.
You go around on the mower, the lawn, at some point the lawn is cut and it's time to move on.
Although, to extend your metaphor, the lawn's never done either. That's going to come back.
Don't ruin this for me.
Okay.
But you know what I'm
Yeah, you get to be outside,
even if you have
physical, you get to do a change of pace too, right? There's been plenty of days when I've looked wistfully at the facilities guys doing the lawns on the big corporate campus. And man, I wish I was out there cutting that grass. Maybe that'd be awesome. So
yeah, it's the change of pace, it's the physicality. But like I said, you can't sit and wait for the lawn to come back, right? So at some point that day, that time, the job is done.
Sure.
Or being a mailman would be really cool too, in which, I delivered the packages and stuff, I'm done. And I want to make clear that I'm not demeaning these jobs. I'm just saying there's finality, at least for that day or that job. Eric, how about yourself? When did you get to your worst point of work-life balance? And especially as someone who considers themselves a worker, how do you reconcile work-life balance now?
That's a good question. I was trying to think about examples when and I've definitely I think everybody experiences periods of sort of burnout or overworked where you kind of just frazzled and you need a week off or whatever, right? For me, probably the worst time was when we were running TrackJS. It was doing really well. It was, taking off, but then I also have this 40-hour a week contract gig, right? And some of these contract gigs are more stressful than others. Some of them you can just go in and sit down, put your head down, bang out the work and be done. And some of them there's drama and stress and it's dysfunction and all that. And so whenever there's that dysfunction coupled with trying to work 25, 30 hours a week on TrackJS, now you're talking about huge amounts of hours going into this thing. And you've got all this, these crazy people at this corporate job that you don't even care about, right? And I think that's what makes it really hard. I can tolerate a lot more work if it's for my own product and my own business and I reap the rewards of it. But if I'm doing it for some company who has just made the worst technical decisions on earth, or they've got bad managers, I really don't care. You know, and that makes it hard. Like, I don't want to lose my weekends if I'm not going to see an extra, you know, any sort of meaningful outcome.
Sure.
But so now, like, that I just work on TrackJS, it's actually been pretty easy to kind of ramp up the focus and the motivation, because there's a meaningful outcome for me. Everything I get done, there's you know, it's my business, right? I can directly impact it. But the other thing that, like, I can find it creeping in, and so I've had to start cutting it out. Like I don't go on Twitter anymore, because Twitter is just like Outrage Factory 9000, right? And I found that if I read Twitter in between, like, doing tasks at work, I'll get less done, because I'll be so angry about whatever it is that's on Twitter. I'm like, you know, and then I'm like, I just lost an hour, right? Because of that. And that's BS. It's the same reason I don't play video games. Like, I don't watch TV, because they're distracting. And, like, for me, the way I have to be able to, like, work without getting burnt out and stuff, but, like, still make a meaningful contribution, is I, like, limit my distractions. I don't, when I first went full time on TrackJS, like, all these people that I hadn't seen in ages, like, let's do lunch. And so I'm doing like 3 lunches a week. But the problem with the lunch is, like, it's 30 minutes to drive there. It's an hour and a half with this person. Maybe you have a cocktail while you're there, so you got another half-hour drive back, and then you're kind of like, what do I do now? You just burned half a day of work doing that lunch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I've just, like, cut all that stuff out. So I guess for me, I look at it from a different perspective. Like, some people say, you know, you should work to live, not live to work, right? Well, I sort of feel like work is this foregone conclusion, right? Like, maybe in some Star Trek future universe that's a utopia, none of us have to work and we can just do what we love, right? But until that day, we'd better figure out how to make the most of work, right? And either have a job that you like or is meaningful, or that you can tolerate. And so for me, it's just been, like, all these tricks to try and figure out, how do I, like, you know, keep my head straight and focused.
I think one of the best ones that I had, and I still think wistfully about this, is, like, probably for maybe 3 years, I was just doing general contracting, right? Just general, you know, recruiter sends you in and you're working on, you know, standing up some sort of web app in 3 weeks. And I really, really still liked that. Like, I liked it the whole time. I liked it because I didn't know anyone's name. Like, I wasn't invited to Sheila's birthday party. Like, they didn't give me an email address. I didn't receive an email address. I didn't have to read emails. Like, so to all emails never hit me. And so I would just show up and I'd be Ronan, you know, and it'd just be like, well, what are you looking for? Well, we want an app that tells you about cereal. Okay, cool. Here we go. Here's your cereal app. Thank you so much. That's a whole bunch of money you just gave me. Goodbye. And except for the gaps, which are very stressful, because then you finish the one contract, you're waiting for another contract to come. Like, things are pretty bad in that time. That was why I stopped doing it. But everything other than that was just the best, because I didn't have the ability to be personally invested in these projects. I just was able to come in and do the best job I could in a short amount of time with very limited constraints.
That's a great point, because I remember, like, my like telltale sign when it was time to leave a contract was when I'd look at my calendar in Outlook and it was more than half meetings. Right? I'm like, no, I know too much. Like, I have too much knowledge here. Like, I got it.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good way to not let yourself get bitter, I should say. You know, if meetings are a signal, I think that's a more positive signal than a lot of stuff. You know, whether it be like, with my first job at, I would say 2:00 on Sunday, I would get the most incredible anxiety because I had work the next day. You know, and that's an obvious sign that you're afraid to go into work just because you just don't like it. And so those stories are really interesting. My story of work-life balance, it ended up changing when I had kids, but you know, like I said, I got out of school and I decided I need to prove I belong here. So you work, you know, the 60 hours, whatever, a week. Then I stopped liking that job and I started my blog. And then, you know, it would be like code all day and then blog all night sort of thing, and blog on the weekends, which back then was fun, but it didn't give me much of a life balance. And then I switched jobs and started working remotely. And again, every time you switch jobs, you know, like I got to prove myself. I got to prove myself. And then there's a remote aspect to it where, you know, you're never away. And I had teammates in other countries and different time zones and stuff. And so you're on like much longer. And then, of course, I made it to Mozilla, and it was always my dream job. So I ended up, you know, working a ton. And I had just gotten married. So I'm like, you know, justifying it to my wife, like, hey, I want us to have a nice, really nice house someday. I need to take care of you. You know, just sort of like mentally justifying everything.
David, let me like a couple times you said like prove yourself, right? At a new job.
Yeah.
And I agree. I definitely have always felt that. Like I want to like first couple months, I got to come in and crank it out, right?
Yeah.
Like watch how good I am. You say it like it's kind of a bad thing though. Like, do you think it's a bad thing? Like, what if you didn't do that and they like fired you or something?
No.
Right? Or like,
Let me,
like, I guess let's talk about the flip side, right?
Yeah,
like, like sometimes maybe it's necessary to do that.
100%.
Like at Mozilla, right? Like you want to make that good impression because this is your dream job, right? Like,
yeah, this isn't coming off correctly. It's something that I'm trying to frame it around work-life balance, right? And so the opposite of work-life balance is going to be, you know, just working extra long hours or, you know, working on extra tough stuff to prove you belong there. So for myself, I would have it no other way. It's just what I do. And I think I would advise everyone else to do that. But from a work-life balance perspective, it's always going to go down in that case.
I think that makes sense because we definitely like planned for that. At the time when all three of us for TrackJS were doing outside contracts, we definitely had conversations where it's like, all right, you know, Todd or Eric or Jordan or whatever, they're ramping up this new contract at this place. They're going to, you know, spend that first 3 weeks like putting in a lot of time and effort there. So let's just not plan a bunch of TrackJS work at the same time because we know that their energy level is going to be down because they're going to be like crushing it at this new contract.
The flip side was that once you put those 3 killer weeks in and set the tone, it gives you like a good 6 months to really take it. You know what I mean? So it was, if you look at it like in a debit,
I built a skateboard, now I can coast.
Yeah, like, you look at it like from a debit like credit perspective, it's like you draw down the account, right? Like at first, but then you like reap it back in some cases, you know, much more.
Yeah, no, I agree with that for sure.
To all my previous employers, I was not doing that.
No, he wasn't talking about any of those. Those are different guys. You don't know her. She lives in Canada.
Yeah.
First 3 weeks, you introduce tiny bugs, and you spend the next 3 weeks fixing them, and you look like a genius. But then, you know, after I got to Mozilla, my wife and I had our first kid, and then we, you know, like 2 or 3 months after, bought a new house. So again, I kept justifying myself why I needed to like keep on this trajectory. And it really hit me. And I wrote a blog post about this, about being a dev dad. When my wife had gone back to work and I was sitting on the couch at, you know, 2:30, 3 o'clock p.m. And the baby was crying and I was doing everything I could to get my son to stop crying. And I was like, dude, what do you want? And I was like, also over here trying to do the computer thing to work. And it hit me like right then that like this isn't working. I can't be the full-time, I shouldn't say full-time. I can't try and watch my kid and work at the same time and expect to be 100%. I need to call my parents. And it wasn't because people weren't available. It's because I thought that I needed to do everything. I hadn't adapted to the fact that I needed to change. And so I talked to my manager, Luke Crouch, who we've had on the podcast before. And I was like explaining, like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm trying to do all this work. I'm trying to get all this stuff done. And he said to me, and I quote, I never heard him swear before. He said, David, what the fuck are you doing? You know, like to really hammer it home to me. Like, dude, you have a kid who needs you. And like, you're not going to be able to work at 100% and watch your kid at 100% at the same time. And that's where I made my change. That's where I finally understood that I couldn't do what I had been doing anymore. And that was hard because, like you, Eric, I was a worker my entire life. That's what I did. That's what I had control over. That's what I was good at. That's where even if you didn't like what you were doing, you were seeing money come in. That was a really big change for me. And so another big thing that Luke had mentioned to me in that conversation was impact. right? Like for me, I always thought that working long hours, like the long hours was the metric. And he said to me, David, more than time, it's about impact. If you fix this really difficult bug in 4 hours, that can be a day's work, right? Like that's how much impact that has on everything else. And as far as where I am today, I think that I'm okay with it. I still get the looks from my wife and my kids sometime when I'm at the computer at 6 o'clock instead of, you know, rushing in to take part in dinner and stuff. But I finally convinced myself to take a week's staycation and to Todd's point, to be able to say no sometimes, because especially with my blog and such, sometimes you have to say no. So like, I guess overall, what lessons did we learn from this? We sort of talked about our story, but I'll start with you, Todd. You mentioned always saying yes. Like, what are some other tips that you can give about getting better at this? Even if you know you're in a bad spot now, what do you know you should be doing but aren't?
Well, one of the things that I was thinking about as you were describing your situation is, like right now I'm in my home office, which I used to work almost exclusively here. But what I found was that, like, if I was spending a day working here, I wouldn't feel like I'd get a day's work done because there's other people here. Like, there's a dog here, my wife's here, the kids are here, and like they know that I'm here. Like they need things. The dog needs to go outside. My wife wants to talk to me about something. The kids need a Band-Aid. You know, things, you know, blow up, and it's not that any of those things take time, it's that they all cause context switches. And like, oh, I have to stop. I was finally like in the zone, and I was finally like, oh, I understood this thing I was trying to do, and now I have to walk away from it. And walking away from it makes me frustrated. Like I'm angry that I have to walk away just when I finally got it, and then I go away, and then I don't give that interaction the care it deserves. And so I do that poorly, and then I come back and I do this poorly, and it ended up just being not good. And so creating boundaries between like times that I'm working and times that I'm not is I think really important for me anyway. I've started working more out of a co-working space just a few blocks away, but that physical separation of like, all right, I am working now and I am gone. I am at this other place that like people cannot bug me at unless it is really an emergency. I feel like it's been good for everything. I feel like I get more done when I'm there because there's no distractions. And then I feel better about coming home and not working when I'm home because I got more done.
Very nice. So moving to a co-working space gave you that mental sort of time framework where now I'm working, now I'm home.
Yeah, it protects your productivity. And it gives you just like this it's hard to describe it in words. It's just like when I'm home, I feel like, all right, I'm home. And like if I want to work and I enjoy working and there's nothing else doing, I can still do that if I want. But I don't have to feel obligated to. And when I'm at work, I don't have to do things for the house. I don't have to do things with family because I'm at work at that point. And that separation minimizes that context switches, which for me is a huge productivity killer. Because every time you context switch, I haven't quite gotten good at Eric's thing. I've been working on it too, like avoiding Twitter and avoiding Reddit and avoiding Hacker News and all those things. I'm trying to. I'm just not super good at it yet. But every time there's a context switch, it's really tempting to be like, I'm not going to start yet. I'm going to check Twitter. Yeah. I'm really angry. I disagree with this person. No, I have to say so.
I'm gonna eat lunch in 30 minutes, so why start something new now? Because I'm just gonna eat lunch in 30 minutes. So
right, and those sort of things just erode the day so much when you like take them in concert.
Or like run an errand, right? Like I've been trying to really cut back my errand running because like it'd be so easy. Like, oh, I'll just run these errands during the day when no one's around. But then like before you know it, like you get in the car, you go run the errand, maybe you run a second errand, you get back, you put the stuff away, like. You can. It's so like an 8-hour work day can be burned in an instant
Right.
like with other stuff, you know, like without that focus or those boundaries. I agree.
Cool. So shifting over to you now that you mentioned that, Eric, what other tips would you say that you?
So David, I really agree when you said, you know, your boss or whatever was saying, like, it's all about impact, right? Like, it's all about, like, it's not about the number of hours you work. It's about the impact that you make. And I had a roommate in college, and he could, like, for a test, he would study for hours. Like, he would convince, like, he'd go to the library, he'd be gone for 12 hours. Like, dude, I studied for 12 hours for this test. And then he wouldn't do well. And I'm like, well, how are you studying? Like, what, you know, what, like, and it turns out what he was mostly doing was dinking around while he's at the library. He, like, the fact that he was at the library for 12 hours, he thought was going to be sufficient, right? And like, I've fallen into that trap too, where I'm like, I'm in front of my computer, I'm thinking about work. Like, why am I not getting anything done? Or why does it feel like I'm not getting anything done? And what I found for me, a lot of it is like, like a lot of the work we do on TrackJS now is not fun work. Like, it's not exciting problems to solve anymore. It's kind of like the boring work that you have to do because that's why people will pay you, right? Because they don't want to do that boring work.
Right.
And so, like, it can be really hard to motivate yourself when you know you've got another like 6 hours of CSS today, right? And now, Lemon, no offense, I know you like CSS, but like for those of us that sort of look at it as like a necessary evil.
No problem with CSS for 6 hours.
But so, like, for me, what I found my biggest trick, and like this probably only works for me because I'm like I can motivate myself pretty easily. Like, I'm just like, you just got to start. You just got to start. Like, just start doing it. You know what I mean? And like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. Just start it. Just start moving the mouse, the keyboard, open the document, open the, like, whatever. And usually if I do that, within 20 minutes, I'm in the task, right? No matter how unpleasant the task is, if I just say, just start it, just do it over and over, like no social media, you just got to do it. That works for me. It probably doesn't work for everybody, but like, sometimes I'll get I'll make tea. I'll be like, I can't do anything other than work until I finish this tea, right? And so, but then that takes 30 minutes. And so by the time 30 minutes goes by, I'm either done with the task because it's amazing. Once you focus and get into something, you can finish things super quick. Or I'm so engrossed in it, I've forgotten what I was irritated about, you know, or like, so for me, that's like just starting. You just got to do it. And then before you know it, you've crushed like not one thing, but 5 things that day, right? Because the last thing I'll mention is like what was common for me is I like to work in spurts. And so like I'll get like a really hard bug or figure out like a new piece of functionality, like, whew, okay, like I gotta let the brain rest for 20 minutes. But then sometimes that 20 minutes would turn into an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours. And like you can justify, well, I got this big thing done today. Well, now I tell myself, what if you did 2 big things today? What if you did 3 big things today? Right? And so just like I play like mental games with myself all the time. So that's like how I do it.
Oh, that's very cool. Lemon, much like Todd, you said that you're in the worst of it now, so to speak, or that there's a bit of a struggle. Like, how do you see yourself getting out of it, I should say?
Well, I feel like I'm just like, I think one of the definitions that that needs to be explored in work life is like this idea of, well, what are both of those things, right? Because let's face it, like web development is pretty cushy. Like it's fine. Like I even get the keyboard that I like, you know, like I know what working hard is, and I rarely do it.
Right.
I type things and I, you know, inspect pixels. So work life to me is like, well, what are things that are motivated by me versus what are things that are motivated by other people? I think the most depressed I've ever been as a human being is the times when I've played the most video games at a time. Like the times that I've spent like, oh, I'm just going to like play Team Fortress for 10 hours. Like that was me at the worst version of me. Just everything about me stunk at that time. Literally and figuratively. But so okay, so then if it's about like what's coming internally versus externally, like what are my desires versus like desires like put upon me, then there's even like if you think about like stuff like meetups, right? You know, so hey, do you want to like, you know, come meet me and whatever, like, hey, here's a guy you haven't met in 2 years and like you should feel guilty about the fact that you haven't met this guy in 2 years. So like, why don't you hang out with him? Ask yourself, do I want to? Do I actually want to?
Yeah.
Like, does that sound fun for me? Is that a good use of 2 hours of my day? Because sometimes it isn't. And so I think that that's one of those things. Like, no matter where that, like, you know, no matter what category the thing is, if it's something that I'm doing for a job or something that I'm doing professionally or something that I'm doing, like whatever is like, where is that request coming from? And do I actually want to do this thing? Do I actually want to do this thing? Because if I have to bust my ass, but I really do want to, that's okay. Like that's turned out really good sometimes.
So here's a question for everyone, because I think Lemon brought up a really good point. Does working on I guess software and being allowed to sit and work at home, is being an engineer too cushy?
Yes.
Have we gotten to the point where have we achieved enough in our life in this industry that we've made it too cushy for ourselves?
I think the fact that we can even discuss something like work-life balance, like I mean, there's a lot of people that don't have a choice, right? It's like you want to eat, you work, or like, oh, my knees hurt today, but you're a roofer, so you're going to get on that roof anyways,
That's
right? Like, I mean, it's so like I do feel like in tech we love to like, you know, really talk about some things. I'm like, the vast majority of humans would hate us if they heard us discussing this stuff, right? And so that's a great point, David.
Yeah. On that note, Todd, outro. Just kidding.
On that note, we're all a bunch of privileged assholes. None of us should be complaining about any of this shit. Goodbye.
I do.
Wear the mouse suit at Chuck E. Cheese once, all right? Walk a mile in that suit, and you'll see some shit.
Yeah. One day we mow lawns, one day we're at the mouse at Chuck E. Cheese, just to see both sides of it. But I do think there's an aspect of the industry where, and you see articles about this all the time, at least on the West Coast, of people working themselves, you know, into pneumonia, you know, that sort of thing. So I do think it's important that, although, you know, we get nice fancy computers and sometimes get to work at home, I do think it's important that we at least try to recognize that work-life balance is important. Otherwise, you know, we're going to fall into that same trap. So that's really good stuff. We get to the fun part. I want to hear what you guys do, like what you're excited about in your life balance. Like what, you know, what do you, I guess, sort of live for? What's the other side of working really hard? Lemon, how about yourself? Like, what do you look forward to doing once you've sort of struck that work-life balance?
I moved offices, so the new office is not that much closer, but in a different proximity, which means that my path to that office is way more bikeable. So I've got like a really nice route that goes, you're only on one crappy street and only for about 4 blocks, and the rest of it is just like really nice bike paths. And that's fantastic. I really, I like doing that. It makes my beginning and end of the day less drudgery. It's good to, like, you know, I got my little fingerless gloves and I got my helmet and I just sort of like whatever. And I'm sweaty at the end of it. And that feels good. And then I get to bike around with my daughter after that as well. So like, that's all really good. And then the rest of it is, I mean, just daughter time, really. That's the best part. That's the best thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, family plays a big role in it. Well, you guys are all in the Midwest. The Midwest weather was awful. Snow everywhere.
I don't understand. What do you mean? What do you mean? Is it just for some reason, if it's just up to your waist, if the snow's up to your waist, that's too high?
Yeah, that's my limit. So, like, obviously, you know, the kids were rambunctious because we couldn't get them outside all that much. And so I signed my kids up for everything. Oh, we're doing baseball this summer. We're doing basketball this summer. We're doing soccer. We're doing swim class. And going to kids' events is, number one, something you need to leave work for. And 2, seeing them grow and get better at things is super enjoyable. So, yeah, I can relate to that quite a bit. Plus, the bike ride is really nice. There was a while where I was feeling stressed out, and I noticed in myself that I wasn't leaving the house. So instead of sit down and, read Twitter and stuff, I would go for a bike ride in the morning. And that felt really, really good to get started. So that's really cool too. Yeah, Todd, how about yourself? What do you look forward to doing when you're not at the computer?
So I want to touch briefly on the seasons thing that we were just talking about, because I actually think there's an important thing about living where there's like a defined winter, is that like it makes you appreciate the summer all the more, right? Is like when there's so much of the year where it's just shitty outside, that's the time of the year that you should probably work a little bit more, because like there's less things to do. Like, what else are you going to do? Like, it's crappy outside and it's cold and it's dark. So I could work a little bit more.
That's fair.
And the flip side of that is when it's summertime, maybe you should work a little bit less. Maybe you should spend a little bit more time outside. Maybe you should enjoy, like, the pleasantness while we have it. And so I've been trying to think about that. And I obviously want to spend a lot of time with my family outside of work. But I have some problems. Like, I've spent so much of the last 15 years working that I don't really have that many hobbies anymore. Like, I used to play video games a lot, but I got kind of like weird and obsessive about them. And like Lemon, I think sometimes when I spend a whole day playing video games, I'm actually not happy at the end of the day.
It's not great.
And so I don't really want to jump back into that super hard. And I tried playing music for a while. Turns out I'm not really good at it, and I end up not being super. I'm more frustrated with it than anything. So I'm on the hunt for like a hobby, something to do. I've been working on the house a little bit more, and that's been kind of fun. But I kind of suck at it. So I don't know.
But do you enjoy it though? That's the important thing, right?
I think it's tied up together, right? It's hard to really enjoy something when you're terrible at it. Like, I want to enjoy it and I want to be good at it, and so I'm going to be dog-headed and push on it for a while. But the jury's still out.
I think there are a lot of golfers would disagree with being terrible but enjoying it.
Well, golfing is about going for a walk in the park with alcohol.
It's the cigars and the booze. Yeah, that's what people like. And you get to drive the cart kind of drunk, and that's fun, you know?
Yeah, that is fun.
If it takes you a couple extra hits to get the ball in the hole, it doesn't really diminish from the overall experience.
I don't know, because I think that no matter what, you can approach all of those hobbies in that same way, you know, like in the idea of like music, like you could get really obsessive, and you could I need to learn how to play the flugelhorn, and I need to learn how to play the what am I thinking of that goes wee wee. But like you can, the word wouldn't come.
The Star Trek thing where you wave your hand in it and it makes noise. Is that what you're talking about?
I hate trying to reach for a word and it not coming to me. Anyway, but you can get, like, if you come with that brain to all those things, that'll come back to you and you'll do that. The idea of going around, with scotch and hitting golf clubs, like, that's fun. But man, hearing people talk about golf that care about it is the most boring thing I've ever heard in my life. It is so dull. And there's a lot of people that view golf in that particular way.
That's fair. But to my point, I do think that you can be bad at something and enjoy it and look forward to it.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Eric, how about yourself? Like, what are you looking forward to outside of monitor tans?
That's a good question. Well, the big news for me is that the wife is 37.8 weeks pregnant. So we are baby watch, just sort of
pulling up the calculator.
So there'll be a new addition to the family any week now.
Congratulations.
So that'll be exciting. So I think that'll be a bit of an adjustment. Right. It sounds like that's going to be, that's a big time commitment and stuff. But, I said,
can I ask if it's the first?
It is the first.
Oh,
it's
wow.
number
Okay,
one.
cool.
And maybe potentially the only one. So we'll see. I was an only child, so I kind of liked that lifestyle. I thought that was a pretty good way to go. But yeah, so no, that's going to be exciting. And there's going to be, I think, some learning about what, what does work-life balance mean then when you've got a little one? But that said, like I said, I have like pared my life down to the point where I have some options, right? I have people doing my lawn. I just got a person that will clean my house, which is the best thing in the world. Like, I did not realize how much I hated scrubbing toilets until I have someone else do it. And like, oh my God, that like takes this huge weight off me. Like, so I think like I'm actually not too worried about it. Like, I think I'll be able to keep working like I always have. And at first I think it's going to be, everyone tells me this newborn thing is just like no sleep ever, right? And like their schedules are totally nuts. And so I think at first it'll be tough. But certainly there are people that work 8-hour days and have multiple children. So it can be done.
I'm one of them, and I'm a survivor. So still here.
Well, and so some of it too, though, I feel like, so like, people talk about like hobbies and, what do you want to do? And like, what's like the meaning, what's really meaningful that you're going to do when you have this time or whatever. And so like, for me, like my number one goal, and this is going to sound stupid. This is going to sound ridiculous, but the number one goal is that like, I want to build as much of a buffer between myself and like poverty as possible, right? And so like for me, like working is a means to ensure the optionality of like future life. That I don't have to like, all of a sudden I've had relatives where they didn't plan for the future. They took I just want to do what I love and I'm not going to put the work in. And they really struggle later in life because they don't have the buffer. And so for me, like it's a balance, like you say, but like I'd rather work now so that 15 years from now, when maybe the computer programming is done by AI,
right,
like I'm in a good position where I'm not like scrambling. I don't have to put that mouse suit back on. You know what I mean? Like that's what keeps me up at night. So that's why
Eric Brandis, motivated to avoid the mouse suit.
Yeah, like that's like, I mean, that those things when you're young can have this huge impact on you, right? Of like, I get like PTSD thinking about having to put that friggin' suit on, right? And the kid's like beating on you, you're just like streaming sweat inside of it, and like it's the worst. So
I want to do an entire episode on your 9 jobs. Because that would be great.
Dude, we could do a number of episodes. There's and a lot of them were very like, they were, I guess, above board, but like the stuff I was doing didn't seem very ethical a lot of times. So.
Okay, now I don't know that we can broadcast that, but I want to talk to you about it even more.
So
cool. Well, first of all, I share that same fear that either the industry won't be around for us humans for a long time and trying to make that money while we can as well. For me, luckily, I still feel like the blog is still part of my personal time that I'm fun to do. A lot of my time gets eaten up by kids' activities, but it's like I said, it's good to see them grow and enjoy things. And I finally have 2 kids that like sports. And so for a guy that like me who grew up with sports, I'm super jazzed to go outside and play basketball instead of referee a fight over who gets to wear what helmet. But for me, like the best part of each of my days is when the kids are in bed and I can spend an hour or 2 with my wife with a glass of wine, maybe 2, watching a movie or Netflix or whatever. To me, that's like the most peaceful, fun part of my day. And so everything that goes up until that, whether it be, work or kids' activities, I'm willing to do things that maybe aren't the funnest thing in the world just so I can have that time at night. Like that's my time, that's my fun time, and that's the best part. I think that about wraps it up. Todd, I can't take away your takeaways line, so I need you to do it for me.
All right. Well, so we end all of our shows by going back over it and saying what's one major thing that each of us kind of took away from the conversation, like a closing note, something that you think the listeners would really want to do. So being that David emceed the show, I think David should actually go first.
Oh my gosh. Takeaways. Number 1, I'm super excited to be back. Number 2, I think that one thing that is both comforting and scary is that, between yourself and Lemon, you like having a lot of, experience in the industry, obviously life experience, I think that it's good that you, even though, like, despite the fact that you're both sort of not feeling like you're in a good spot with work-life balance, you recognize it and you have ideas for how to make it better. Recognizing it is the big one, because it means that you aren't completely, totally burnt out yet, and that there seems to be a little bit of optimism that, things can go in the right direction. I also think that I heard multiple people.
Uh-oh.
I
Hello?
think that's huge.
David, you disappeared to us for some few minutes there. You want to repeat your last two statements?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened there. I think that it's really important, and I heard everyone mention it, is the physical activity as being work-life balance, because getting out, sweating, seeing people, fresh air, I think that's a huge help. How about yourself?
My takeaways, I really liked a couple of things that Eric said today. So I'm gonna actually have two of them. The first is on, actually, both you and David and Eric, I think, said around, it's not about hours in the desk, right? Like, you don't have to work 8 hours or 12 hours just to work 8 or 12 hours. Sometimes you got something really hard done and it just took a lot of mental energy, and it's okay. That's okay to just be like, you know what? That exhausted, what I'm going to be able to get done for the day, and I think it's okay to be done. And the other thing about that I want to highlight is something that Eric said around just starting. Sometimes it's like you just lose so much energy for work by being worried about something, or like stressing about, oh, this task is like really going to suck and I don't want to do it. But you just need to, open it up and start. Make the cup of tea as Eric does, or like open up the document and write the first sentence, or get that first class working, or write that first test, or whatever it is that you're doing. Just start. I think that's interesting. Lemon, what do you think?
I think maybe I've spent this hour just sort of thinking about the standards by which we define some of those things, like the standards by which we define what's bad work and what's frustrating work and what's working too much, and what's fun, because I'm still somebody that gets to have a lot of fun in the course of a week, and I'm somebody that I think can gauge where I know fun is, and so I think that with expectations, figuring out those standards of where that pleasure can come from is an important thing to think about.
Awesome. Eric, you get the last word.
Mine's not very profound, but one thing that I found interesting is that both you and Lemon, and David, I can't remember if you mentioned it too, but like playing too many video games as like not a good thing for your mental state. And I found that interesting just because that's why I quit playing them years ago, was that I would get obsessed with them, or I'd want to be the best, right? Like I'd get frustrated. And I think that's really interesting. And I wonder if there are other things that people do for quote unquote fun that actually are like causing, like social media, right? Like a lot of people spend a lot of time on Twitter or whatever. Like, are some of those things, like, does the problem like manifest itself actually as like burnout or lack of motivation on the work side, but it's really these other things that are causing it? And I think that's interesting.
Well, you can see, you see it happen like when people like, just absolutely smashing themselves on like Ironman or like triathlon kind of stuff, right? Like, okay, so obviously like, you're breaking through a wall, and that's awesome. But you're definitely seeing situations where it's like, I don't think you're making your life better doing this stuff, dog. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I agree. Like, it's like, man, is this like on balance? Is this the right like thing for you, right? So yeah, I thought that was interesting, and I just feel like video games are so prevalent now, and they've been so optimized, right, to like do the dopamine rush and all this stuff. And I do wonder if that is having an impact on people's sort of feelings of well-being. and that kind of thing.
Because it's diminishing returns. Because you can have a situation where, you know, like you get this like nice, pretty video game, and then you get to like shoot a Nazi in the face, and it's like, well, this is delightful, right? But they're not contained things. They're things that spread out over like 60 hours. Well, can you possibly feel that good for 60 hours straight? No. Right.
Yeah, you have to have, I mean, it's like acceleration, right? Like you have to keep more and more dopamine, otherwise you're gonna like crash, sort of. So, but it was funny to hear you guys say that too, just because I've been out of the video game world for a long time, so I wasn't sure if people still felt that way. But
I think that's really true, because like I've been playing just some casual video games like on my phone. Like just, you know, I'm bored, I'm gonna play this video game. I've been playing Dr. Mario, the new Dr. Mario game. I had a legit stress stream last night about Dr. Mario. like the viruses kept coming, and I kept throwing capsules at them, and I couldn't get rid of them. And I woke up legitimately stressed out that I couldn't get past this level of Dr. Mario, and it felt like so real. And I'm like, God damn.
Yeah.
Like this is supposed to be like a chill, like boring, like, hey, I'm just killing some time kind of game. Why is this doing it to me? And it's totally like the, you know, the gamification dopamine hits or whatever that they've built into these things. All right. Well, so I think that's the show. Thanks so much, guys, for being on the show and telling some stories. I think this was a really interesting show. Hopefully we gave some tips to some people to help them balance their own lives. I'll have the show notes up online in a few minutes with more information. Thanks so much for listening. Hopefully we won't be too long before the next episode. So any parting words, anyone? All right. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
See you guys.